Welcome back. Today we are sewing the shovel block, and this one's a really satisfying build. It's got a little bit more going on than the cone and the hat, but it's no more difficult than the dirt pile. The hardest thing about it is probably its size because it is a little bit larger. But if you've made any of the other ones previously mentioned, you're going to be just fine, and I'm going to walk you through this one anyways, so even if you're starting with this, you'll be great. The shovel shape has some great angles to it, and it gives it a lot of character later on in the finished quilt, so let's get into it. Before we start sewing, we want to get the pattern taped together and colored in. Print out your pattern pages, lay them out, and line them up on the edges. Then tape them together on the back so your front stays nice and clean. We have a 1-inch square that's going to help you ensure that you have your sizing correctly, so you double check that. And then if you are not going to follow along the colors that we have set in there, then you'll want to color those in. We're using the same colors, so we didn't color in this one, so we don't have that step to show, but you'll just use your coloring page and color in your pieces accordingly so that you can make sure that you're using the right fabric as you're building your pieces. All right, now that you have your pattern taped together and ready to go, you are going to get your first piece of fabric and lay that on your pattern. You'll see that we flip the pattern over and we can kind of see through that paper where it needs to go, and you're going to put your fabric pretty side facing up, so not facing the paper, facing you, and then pinning that to the paper so that it doesn't slip around. All right, then you're going to fold your pattern back so that you can trim your seam allowance. And then you're going to use that line that you just created with that fabric to help you with your next section. So you're going to put your fabric down pretty sides facing up so that you can place your fabric down on top of that, so it's going to be pretty sides facing each other. You'll see that we already had that other side sewn on there. We're going to pretend like we didn't. For whatever reason, we didn't film it. So just pretend like this is step 2. Don't worry about that other step. So you're going to do it pretty sides facing each other. You're going to open your pattern up and then pin that on, because these are kind of long pieces of paper or pieces of fabric, so they do tend to shift as you're moving it to your sewing machine, so it's nice to be safe and making sure that you've got it on there. Then you're going to sew along that black line, and then open it up and press it. Now to do the next number, so number 2, you're going to do the exact same thing, and then once you're done with that, you're going to end up looking exactly like this. So you just do number 2, you just repeat it exactly how you just did number 1 and 2, I guess, so number 3. All right, so we're on to number 4 now. We're going to put our fabric pretty sides facing up so that you can put your fabric on top of that new piece. So pretty sides are now facing each other when you're talking about both pieces of fabric. And then we are going to double check to make sure that if we fold this out, it is going to cover the piece that we need it to cover entirely, with enough for a seam allowance there. We're going to check all the way around. We're set on there, so we're going to make sure it's still along that line how we want it to, and then we are going to pin that and then sew right along that black line. It's really, really important that you're trying to be as accurate as possible with this, staying along that black line so that you can get those clean, sharp lines that are shown in the pattern. All right, so we've done 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to go on the other side and do the exact same thing we did with number 4 for number 5. We're going to cut that fabric, leave a good seam allowance. We're using an add a quarter ruler right there. We've linked everything that we use below in the description. It's just a nice ruler that has a little bit of a lip that grabs the paper to make sure you have a good seam allowance there. All right, so we sewed along that line, pressed it open, and then we are going to move on to the next piece here. Fold the pattern back, trim your fabric with a seam allowance, add your fabric, sew along the line, press it open, repeat. So the great thing about foundation paper piecing is the method is exactly the same over and over and over again. It's just getting comfortable with it so that as you get more complicated patterns, The small pieces don't intimidate you. These are great patterns to start out with. All right, we've done pretty sides together. We've added our fabric. We've made sure that when we fold it out, it's going to cover our piece that we need. Pinned it on there, sewed it, and now we are going to open it up and press it. You want to make sure you don't force the fabric open, because if you are pulling it open, then you're going to start seeing your stitches, and we don't want to do that. So just gently set your fabric and your seams and then press it open, and do not force them open. All right, we're going to fold our pattern back, trim along that fabric, giving ourselves a seam allowance. Get your fabric pretty sides up, line those up. Make sure that your fabric is going to cover the entire piece that you need it to. And pin your fabric on there so it doesn't shift, and then sew along that black line as accurately as possible. All right, there we got it. We're going to press those open. And keep going on. All right, next we're going to do the handle. So we need to fold that back and trim our fabric. They're at 1/4. And we've already got our piece here. We've made sure that it is going to cover what we need it to cover when folded back. We're putting it pretty sides together, lining it up with that fabric that we just trimmed so we know we have a good seam allowance, pinning it to our pattern, and then we're going to sew across that black line. All right, fold it back, press it gently. Then we move on to the next. We are getting so close. It's coming together so well. We're going to trim this. Give ourselves a good seam allowance. We have our piece of fabric, pretty sides facing each other. Line it up along that line. And we'll open it up and pin it down to make sure that it doesn't shift when we move it to our machine. All right, then we're going to open it up and press it. All right, we are moving right along. We'll fold that pattern back, trim our excess fabric. All right, then you're going to add your next fabric piece, pretty sides together. You're going to fold your pattern back, pin that fabric down so it doesn't shift when you put it on your machine, and then open it up and press it. There are just like there's one more step after this. You can do the exact same, follow the exact same process to finish up the top of that shovel there, and then we are going to move over to this next section for the tutorial's sake. Again, we'll start with number 1. You're going to put your fabric there, pretty side facing up, and then pin it to your pattern so it doesn't shift around. We're just making sure that it's covering everything with a good seam allowance. And then once you have that piece, we are going to go to number 2. You will fold the pattern back. With that ruler, cut off the excess and give yourself a seam allowance. Pretty sides facing up. You're going to line your pattern up against that piece, and then you know that that section is the part that needs to be covered by your fabric when folded out. So we're looking through the paper at the lines on the pattern to ensure that the fabric facing up is going to cover all of that. We're good, so we're going to just pin that down and then sew across that line. We flipped that pattern out, pressed it, got it nice and flat, and then we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. So fold your pattern back, trim off that excess fabric with leaving a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We'll get our piece of fabric and line it up, making sure that it will cover all of the piece we need it to cover by looking kind of through the back of the paper at the lines on the pattern. And we are good with that. Because the fabric piece is so big, we just marked the outside of the pattern to give ourselves a guide to be able to trim off the excess fabric down there. It can get really tricky when using a big sheet of fabric. Okay, we're just double checking. Yep, when we fold that out, everything is covered. So we're gonna pin that on there and then run it through the machine and then press it. And we'll go through and trim off the excess as we work through these next pieces. So fold the pattern back, trim off your excess. And we're gonna get our next piece and line that up, making sure that when we fold it out, it will cover the area that we need it to cover. We're lining that up pretty sides together and then fold it out. Now we'll trim off that excess after pressing. Nice thing about these pieces is that they're kind of small right here, so you're able to use a lot of scrap, especially if this isn't your first block and you're using the same background fabric for all of your blocks. So try to look through your scrap pile as you're working through this one. All right, we're gonna fold the pattern back, line them up pretty sides together, and then sew across that line once you make sure that you are covering the entire area you need covered. Press it out. All right, so we're gonna move on to the other side. We're just creating that shape of the spade, of the shovel. Again, this is a great part to use scrap pieces. So go through that scrap pile. We're gonna do pretty sides together. Make sure that the piece, when folded out, will cover the entire area you need it to cover. Just pinned it to the pattern so that it didn't shift when we ran it through the machine. And we're gonna fold it open and press it out. All right, we've got 2 more pieces left here to finish off this section. We are so close to being done. Get that fabric, pretty sides together, line it up with your fabric line that you just created when trimming off the excess. Fold your pattern back and run it through the machine. All right, we've just about created the entire shape of that shovel. We just have one last piece. You're gonna fold that pattern back, trim off your excess. Put your next piece pretty side facing up, making sure that it will cover the entire area you need it to cover when lined up. All right, and then just sew along that line. Okay, I said that was the last piece, but it is not. We have one more piece, but it's exactly the same as this one that we just did. It's a very tippy top. So we're gonna fold that pattern back and then trim along that line with the seam allowance, reducing that bulk. And then you get your next piece of fabric, lay it pretty sides up, matching the line you just created, and then sew along that black line, and you are done with this block, and we are ready for assembly. All right, now that we have got both of these made. All we need to do is combine the two and we are done. So the assembly portion is pretty straightforward and simple. You'll just want to trim off your excess of both of these blocks that we just did, especially where it is going to be sewn together. Do not cut off the dotted lines. Keep the dotted lines. That is your seam allowance. So you'll want to make sure that you're matching up those 2 points right here, because that's where the continuous line needs to happen. So the way that we do it is we line those two up. You can poke a needle all the way through both of those, or you can eyeball it and then clip it. And then an option is to sew kind of just like darts on either side to make sure that those are lining up when you open it up. The reason why this is so important is because this is the difference between it looking like one cohesive image versus two blocks kind of together off center, and then it throws off the look of the entire block that you just worked so hard to do. So do not skimp on this step. Make sure you are doing your due diligence to get those lined up. Pin all the way through the corners, making sure that they are lined up, and then clip them and double, triple check. This is like the equivalence of measure twice, cut once. All right, so we've got our little darts in there. We like where it's lined up. So we're just gonna make sure everything else is lined up the way it needs to be. And as long as we're not adjusting, those 2 points, then we're gonna be set. If you've been working through this series, you're making great progress. Every block you finish is another set of skills in your pocket. The vehicle blocks are up next. They're going to feel so much more manageable now that you've got this foundation under you. If you want the pattern for the shovel or the full construction site bundle, the links to my Etsy shop are down below in the description below. These tutorials are specific for the Mighty construction site quilt pattern, so it will look a little bit different if you're not going off of the pattern. The quilt patterns and you're doing the construction site bundles, but they are so similar that it shouldn't throw you off. It's just going to be another piece here or there. If this tutorial was helpful, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe so that you can see any other new tutorials coming out. Happy quilting, everyone. I will see you in the next one.